Sometimes, love arrives in the most unexpected of ways. It doesn't follow a polite script or wait for the opportune moment. Sometimes, it disrupts your carefully laid plans at 2 a.m. With your supposedly straight roommate spread out on the couch, shirt haphazardly lifted, everything about him exuding careless ease, and suddenly, your heart betrays you, skipping in ways it has no business doing. This is a story of temptation, of blurred lines and fragile bonds, of friendship turned into something more. It's about grappling with the breathtaking realization that you're falling for someone who was never meant to be yours. Because life has a funny way of overturning expectations. It started with a glance and unassuming moment, and grew into something undeniable. 3 months ago, when I moved into the apartment with Ryan, I told myself it would be straightforward. A simple arrangement of shared rent, split bills, and 2 guys coexisting in neutral harmony. Nothing complicated. Ryan fit the quintessential roommate description you'd find in any college housing ad. Laid back, hilariously unpolished, and always late for things that mattered. But then there was the other side of him, 6'2" inches with sun-kissed skin that seemed incapable of dimming in winter, perpetually messy black hair that defied reason or gravity, and a grin so magnetic it could bend the will of the entire room including mine. Noticing him was bad enough. Realizing I couldn't stop noticing was worse. Every time he came back from the gym with his shirt clinging to his torso, I fought to keep my eyes glued to my laptop. Saturday mornings were even harder. He'd amble around barefoot and bleary-eyed, stretching and scratching his unruly hair while I drowned under an uninvited but all-encompassing wave of affection. Affection I had no right feeling, because Ryan was straight, unequivocally, unambiguously straight. His dating life consisted of casual flings with girls from class or late-night party encounters. They giggled down the hallway to his room, tiptoeing at odd hours, before slipping quietly out through the front door as another night wrapped up under Ryan's charm. I'd bury my face in my pillow and remind myself that he wasn't mine to dream about. He never would be. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Then came that night. Sometime past midnight, I wandered into the dimly lit kitchen, searching for water. The only illumination came from the pale blue glow of the TV. And there he was, sprawled on the couch like a vision of unguarded ease. He'd fallen asleep in the middle of an episode, head tilted back, lips parted slightly. One arm limp over the cushion, and the other grazing the floor. His tank top had ridden up just enough to reveal toned abs beneath it, and his loose basketball shorts shifted in ways that made my breath stutter. I froze, caught between guilt and magnetic fascination. I knew I should have looked away, that this moment wasn't meant for me, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. It wasn't just his appearance. It was the vulnerability radiating from him. The self-assured, easygoing Ryan everyone adored was somehow gone in this stillness. All that remained was a boy bathed in shadows and television light. Breathing softly, lost in dreams I couldn't be part of. Stop staring. I whispered harshly to myself, as though trying to break free from an invisible pull. My feet refused to listen. Before I could gather my better judgment, Ryan stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, hazy with unfiltered sleep, as he squinted toward me. His voice, low and rough with exhaustion, broke the quiet. "Alex, what are you doing up?" I nearly dropped the glass in my hands as my pulse surged in response. Water," I stammered like a fool. My throat felt parched despite how tightly I clutched the drink. Ryan groaned lightly as he stretched out his long frame on the couch, a lazy movement that made his shirt ride up further before he tugged it back down with a chuckle. "Fell asleep out here again," he mumbled through a yawn. Netflix 1, Ryan 0. The smile he sent my way wasn't his usual social mask, the ones he flashed at parties or when charming someone new. This one was softer, more genuine, tinged with sleep and openness. And as I stood there, bathed in the quiet glow of flickering television light, I became stubbornly aware of how badly I wanted to cross that small distance between us. I wanted to reach for him, to touch the warmth radiating off his skin, just to prove it wasn't all in my head. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I clumsily, don't single quotes to know if you can keep up with it. His words hung in the air, part confession, part question. I turned to look at him. His head was tilted back against the couch, eyes half closed, but his lips pressed together as if holding back more. "Yeah," I said softly, my voice almost swallowed by the quiet hum of the room. All the time, he glanced at me then, and for a heartbeat too long, we just looked at each other. The vulnerability in his face was something I'd never seen before. It was like he was cracking open just a little, enough for me to glimpse whatever weight he carried beneath his effortless charm. Ryan shifted, leaning forward, elbows braced on his knees. "I don't know," he muttered, rubbing a hand through his damp hair. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be, you know?" I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "Yeah," I managed, unsure if I should say more, if he wanted me to press, or if silence would say enough. The air between us felt charged again. Like back in the kitchen that day, with the syrup moment. He rubbed the back of his neck, shaking his head as though trying to brush off whatever heavy thing had settled over him. "Oh, sorry. That probably didn't make any sense." "It did," I said quickly. "It makes sense." There was a flicker of relief in his eyes when he looked at me again. And something about it, vulnerable and unguarded, made it harder for me to keep pretending I didn't feel what I felt. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I wasn't imagining this connection after all. Maybe it wasn't one-sided in the way I'd been forcing myself to believe. You ever feel like people already have this perfect version of you in their heads? Ryan's voice was quieter now, his gaze focused on some distant point across the room. "And no matter what you do, you're either disappointing them or pretending to be someone you're not." "Yeah," I said again, my own thoughts swirling as I mirrored his hunched position. I wanted to say more. That he didn't need to pretend around me. That, whatever he was going through, I understood more than he might think. But my courage faltered, tangling in my chest alongside everything else. The room fell into silence again, but not an uncomfortable one. It was thick with unspoken things hanging in the air between us. Both of us too tangled in our own thoughts, or perhaps too scared to say them aloud. Eventually, Ryan broke the quiet with a tired chuckle. "God, we're a mess." I forced a smile and nudged him lightly with my shoulder. "Speak for yourself." He smirked at that, and even though it wasn't much, it was enough to make my pulse quicken all over again. The night faded away around us, the fridge still humming faintly as we sat there side by side on the couch. And in that strange and quiet moment, I realized something else too. Maybe falling for Ryan wasn't something I got to choose anymore. Maybe it had already happened long before I even noticed. And whether or not it would break me, that wasn't entirely up to me anymore either. Eyes narrowing as if trying to read my mind. "You've been off tonight," he said softly, his voice cutting through the distant hum of the party. I shrugged, avoiding his gaze, even as the pull of his presence wrapped around me like a tether. "I'm fine," I lied. "You should get back to your date." He frowned, leaning against the railing beside me. "Date?" I rolled my eyes, trying to sound indifferent. The blonde, "You two looked ... cozy." For a moment, he didn't say anything, and I felt the weight of his silence settle heavy between us. Finally, he breathed out a laugh, low and humorless. "Is that what you think?" I turned to him then, caught off guard by the edge in his tone. His gaze was steady now, no longer vague or unreadable. There was something raw behind his eyes that I hadn't seen before, something that scared me as much as it fascinated me. "It doesn't matter what I think," I muttered. "It's none of my business." His jaw tightened, and he shook his head as if frustrated. "Alex," he began, but I cut him off. "Seriously, Ryan, it's fine. Forget I said anything." My words tumbled out too quickly, my defenses rising like a wall between us. I was panicking, and I knew it, terrified that I'd exposed too much of myself in a moment of weakness. But then he stepped closer. And suddenly, all I could focus on was how close we were, how the space between us felt smaller than it should. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper, but it seemed to echo louder than the noise drifting from inside the house. "It matters to me." My breath hitched. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice breaking on the last syllable. His eyes searched mine, and for a split second, I thought he might actually answer. But then he seemed to think better of it. Instead, he sighed, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to sort himself out. "I'm saying, ... He trailed off, finally glancing away and laughing nervously. "I'm saying you're an idiot if you think I'd rather be inside with her than out here with you." I blinked. Stunned into silence. "Ryan, look," he interrupted gently. His words, hesitant, but careful, deliberate. "I don't know what this is or why it's taken me this long to figure it out. But I know that when I'm around you, everything just feels ... different." The world seemed to stand still as I absorbed his words, then narrowed again until all that existed was the two of us standing there in the dark. My heart thundered wildly in my chest, and for once, I didn't try to quiet it. "You mean that?" I asked finally, afraid of hoping too much, but unable to stop myself from stepping toward him. He nodded slowly. The vulnerability in his expression enough to make my walls crumble. His voice was unsteady but resolute. "Yeah, I do." In that moment, the tension that had been building for months finally snapped like a thread stretched to thin. And before either of us could think better of it, we closed the distance between us completely. When our lips met, it wasn't fireworks or an explosion. It wasn't rushed or frantic. It was quiet and certain, like drawing a final line in the sand and stepping over it willingly. It felt like finding something we hadn't even realized we'd been searching for all this time. And for once, I didn't feel the need to pretend anymore. "It's not. So you can tell me it was all in my head." His voice cracked, bitterness laced with vulnerability. I gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles white with tension. "No, Ryan, because it wasn't just in your head. It wasn't just the alcohol talking. And we both know it." He looked at me then, really looked at me, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for any sign that I was lying, which, for once, I wasn't. The silence between us was charged, heavy with everything we were refusing to say. The city lights flickered in the distance, but it felt like the rest of the world had faded away, leaving just the two of us caught in this moment. "I don't know what you want me to say," he admitted, finally, his voice quieter now, cracked at the edges. He stared down at the beer bottle in his hands, turning it over and over, as if it held the answers he couldn't find. "I'm a mess, Alex. I don't even know who I am half the time." My chest tightened at his words, the rawness in his admission cutting deeper than I expected. "You don't have to have everything figured out," I said softly, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. "But don't shut me out. Don't pretend like this never happened." He finally set the bottle down on the ground and leaned back against the railing, eyes fixed on the sky above. "I'm scared," he whispered. The words hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. I wanted to reach out and touch him, to offer comfort in some way, but I didn't know if he'd let me. "Scared of what?" I asked. "Of losing you," he said after what felt like an eternity. His voice was barely audible now, carried away on the breeze. "Of ruining everything." "You're not going to lose me," I said with as much conviction as I could muster, though my heart hammered violently in my chest. "But we can't keep pretending there's nothing here when there obviously is." He exhaled sharply, as though he'd been holding his breath for far too long. "What if I can't give you what you want?" I met his gaze then, determined not to look away, even though every second felt like standing on a ledge. "What do you think I want?" His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite a frown. It was something broken, conflicted. "Everything," he said finally. "And what if all I want is you?" My words came out unguarded, bare. Ryan flinched as though he'd been struck, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation or doubt. When he didn't find any, he swallowed hard and shook his head. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Then let's figure it out together," I said calmly. Even though inside I was anything but calm, the weight between us grew lighter for a moment. Crack in the wall he'd built around himself, but then something shifted in his expression, fear creeping back in. He stood abruptly, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was nervous. "I need time," he muttered, looking anywhere but at me. I nodded slowly, trying to ignore the ache blooming in my chest again. "Take all the time you need," I replied quietly. But, as those words left my mouth, I couldn't help wondering just how much longer I could wait before breaking completely. Without another word, Ryan disappeared inside, leaving me alone under the glow of distant city lights and the unasked question lingering in my mind: would time really be enough? Or was it already till that connection had been a fleeting moment, a spark snuffed out before it could catch fire? But then the door opened, and there he was, hair-tousled, cheeks flushed, and determination etched across his face. My breath lodged in my throat as he stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "I've been walking for hours," Ryan said, his voice hoarse, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket, thinking, trying to make sense of it all. I stayed silent, giving him space to speak, though my heart hammered against my ribs. He looked up at me then, eyes searching mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "You're right. Pretending it didn't happen won't change anything. And I don't know what this means yet, Alex. I don't know what I'm doing or where this is going. But I know one thing." I swallowed hard. "What?" "I can't stay away from you," he admitted quietly, his voice trembling. "I've tried, but I can't. There's something about you that just, pulls me in, no matter how much I fight it." The walls I'd built around my hopes and fears began to crumble at his words. But I forced myself not to rush forward, not to break the delicate thread of honesty between us. "Ryan," I said carefully, "I don't need you to have all the answers right now. I just need you to be here with me, however messy or complicated that might be." His shoulders sagged in relief, and for the first time all day, a faint, tentative smile ghosted across his lips. "You make it sound simple. Maybe it doesn't have to be as hard as we think," I said softly. For a long moment, we just stood there, two people staring across the divide that had once seemed insurmountable. And then, almost shyly, Ryan crossed the room and closed the distance between us. When his arms found their way around me, it wasn't like the night before. There was no urgency this time, no desperation. Just a quiet kind of determination, like he was making a choice and choosing me. His breath brushed against my cheek as he whispered, "I'm scared as hell, so am I." I replied, resting my forehead against his. "But we'll figure it out together." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a fragile glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could face this storm and come out on the other side. The kiss was a mistake, a fleeting moment we both wished we could take back. Then the door opened. Ryan walked in, his hair tousled by the wind, cheeks rosy from the cold. His eyes locked onto mine immediately. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice thick and rough. My throat tightened. Yeah, we sat on opposite sides of the couch with a gap between us wide enough to feel like an unbridgeable chasm. Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if searching for answers in its patterns. "I went for a walk to clear my head, and all I could think about was you," he said, his words rushed, his vulnerability undeniable. My heart skipped a beat. "Brian," he lifted his gaze, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I don't know what I'm doing, Alex. I've never felt this way about a guy before. But when I'm around you, everything else just fades away. And last night, kissing you, it felt right. To ignore. Tears welled in my eyes. "Then don't ignore it," I whispered. He shook his head, laughter tinged with bitterness escaping his lips. "It's not that simple. What if people find out? What if I'm not who I thought I was? What if I screw everything up and lose you?" I moved closer, narrowing the space between us until the canyon felt less overwhelming. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to figure out everything tonight. All I ask is that you're honest with yourself. And with me." His gaze locked onto mine, his breathing heavy as his carefully built walls crumbled piece by piece. Slowly, he reached out across the space between us, his hand trembling until it found mine. "I don't want to lose you," he admitted in a whisper that barely broke the silence. "You won't," I promised softly, clasping his hand in reassurance. "Not if we do this together." The kiss that followed wasn't rushed or desperate like the first. It wasn't born out of confusion or fear. This one was tender, a quiet confession expressed through lips, meeting gently. through hands clinging tightly, through breaths shared in the stillness of our apartment. When we finally pulled apart, Ryan rested his forehead against mine, eyes fluttering closed as he spoke with quiet intensity. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but right now, I want this. I want you. Tears slipped silently down my cheeks as I smiled at him, a smile full of relief and hope, and that's all I needed to hear. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. They were messy, raw, and real. Ryan wrestled with who he was, sometimes withdrawing in moments of doubt and fear, sometimes diving headfirst into embracing the unknown. There were sleepless nights with conversations whispered in half-lit rooms and mornings where uncertainty lingered like fog over coffee cups. But there were also moments of joy, playful banter while cooking breakfast together, stolen touches as we worked side by side, movie nights where Ryan curled up against me without hesitation, laughter that felt liberated, and kisses that felt like home. We weren't just roommates anymore. We had become something new, fragile, yet beautiful in its imperfection. Together, Ryan began to let go of the resistance within himself and started to accept us for what we were real. One evening, nestled on the balcony with the city lights winking in the distance, Ryan draped an arm around my shoulders and pulled me close as if grounding himself in our connection. You know what's crazy? He began thoughtfully. What? I asked, leaning into him as the cool night air swirled around us. I spent so long convincing myself I was straight, that I had to fit some box someone else built for me, and then you showed up and ruined it all. He laughed softly at himself as the confession spilled out spontaneously. Sorry about that. Don't be, he replied gently, pressing a kiss to my temple, a gesture so simple yet filled with meaning. Because you're maybe the best thing that's ever happened to me. Warmth blossomed within my chest, a spreading glow that chased away remnants of fear or hesitation. You mean that? Yeah, he nodded fervently, his eyes bright and sincere despite the complexity of his emotions. I don't know where this road takes us next, but I do know I don't want to walk it alone. I cupped his face tenderly and kissed him beneath the embrace, less about immediate answers and more about faith in whatever would come next. For the first time in what felt like years or maybe forever, I wasn't afraid anymore. What I'd learned is that love rarely arrives neatly wrapped or politely timed. It doesn't wait for convenience or perfection to make an entrance. Love barges into